I am resident of Collinwood, Joel Saints, joined by the author of Running Home to Shadows, Jim Beard. So I have a question for you. When did you start writing this?
Oh, wow. This book has been around in my head for quite a while. But let's see. We actually started in on it early. No, wait a minute. It might have been late 2021. And we worked on it into 2022, and then the book actually came out last year, about mid last year, if I remember. It's funny. It's all was such a whirlwind and, and a blur that I'm not even sure of the dates anymore on it. It's it's a book that sort of just I blinked and it happened.
Yeah. You make mention of your late wife Becky in this book
Yeah.
when she was almost 3 when she began watching Dark Shadows, and you
Yep.
were you were 1 years old when you began watching
Right. Yeah, yeah, we have to say that lightly for me if I actually watched it. I have memories of it being on the
it.
TV as my mother had her afternoon soaps on. I remember that was before I went to kindergarten, but Becky was a very early bloomer. She remembered so much going back so far, and how immediately captivated she was by the show, and that went all the way up into her actual school days. And she was, though, that proverbial kid, the I ran home from school kid. She was the very first person that I heard use that phrase, and it was cute for a while where I thought that was unique to her, how naive I was. And then we really got onto the internet, we really got into Facebook and everything, and then suddenly I kept seeing and hearing all these people saying, "Yeah, I ran home from school to watch Dark Shadows." And I remember turning to her and saying, "Wait a minute, I thought that was just you." And here it turns out, no, it's an actual phenomenon. And so that's basically how the book began.
Yeah, that's something as a fan of DS, I've heard constantly how many people say, I ran home from school in the 60s. And they're like, hey, when did you start watching it? I'm like, in syndication. I'm not that old.
Sure. And you know what? Really watched it like that. In fact, the very first real episode I ever watched was a videotape that Becky had taped off of TV at some point. She and I met in 1988, and so it would have been previous to that. She had a couple of episodes on videotape, and I remember how wavery it was. And we watched it, and it's funny, I remember saying to her, like, I've never really been able to watch this show. And luckily it was one of her favorite storylines. It was the one where Quentin has his crazy wife locked away, and she keeps getting out somehow and just sort of appearing, in corridors and in rooms, crazy Jenny,
Yeah.
right? Her name is Jenny, right? And Becky's like, "Oh, I love this storyline." So that was really cool. And it was literally her enthusiasm and love and passion for the show that really dragged me in.
Yeah. Who who's some of your favorite characters for the TV show, and who was some of Becky's?
Yeah, Becky's, it begins and ends with Barnabas. I mean, I know that maybe that's the stock answer, but it really is true, how much she loved that character. And then, strangely enough, one of her other favorite characters was the guy that Barnabas abused, which
Well,
is Willie
well,
Loomis. Becky loved Willie. She felt so bad for Willie, and as much as she loved Barnabas, she wanted to take care of Willie. Um, uh, as far as me, I gravitate towards some of the more oddball characters. Like, I really like Nicholas Blair.
yeah.
Becky and I both liked Reverend Trask. She loved Reverend Trask. anything about bricking people up behind walls. She was a fan of. Um, oh, you know, I'm a big Burke Devlin fan.
Yeah.
Isn't that
What?
funny? And then when it comes down to all the ladies on the show, it's still going to be Maggie. You know, I never cared much for Victoria and Vicky, and Becky was the same way. It's not that she didn't like Alexandra Mulkey. She just,
No.
I don't know, we just didn't care much, you know, for the character. And I think everybody liked Angelique, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never heard anybody say, yeah, not really a fan.
I, I always joke. I'm like, listen, no Collins is a good shot with a gun at all. They're all that. They're all. If you ever notice the, okay, the duel with Jeremiah. The only reason Barnabas actually hits Jeremiah is because basically Angelique has put a spell on the whole thing
Right.
with the medallion that she gives Barnabas. Because once she hears about the duel, she's like, she has these big eyes, like, oh crap, he's screwed. Look,
There's there are those common traits that run through that family. The other one is not being able to recognize anybody who comes to stay at Collingwood as being a bad influence.
yeah.
We always used to joke about how often somebody showed up at the door and they were told they could have a room, you know, like, yeah, you can stay, you know, for a while. And you wanted to yell at Elizabeth. It's like, stop letting people stay at that house. You wouldn't have any problems whatsoever if you would just stop letting people stay, like an open-ended stay too, you know.
It's like you literally have Willie who's been brought to town by by Jason McGuire,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah,
like Jason staying.
yeah.
I like how there was one time I was watching a UFC fight with somebody, and when somebody got knocked out, they said, "You ever see somebody get hit that hard?" I said, "Yeah, when Barnabas hits Willie." Um, I'm like, it's
You have to
brutal.
have somebody say, "I understand that reference. I get that." That's good. You know, I'm so Jason McGuire was another one of Becky's favorite characters. She loved. She used to like to say, she used to mock Carolyn. Jason McGuire, Jason McGuire. Like when she said, it's like that's all I hear is Jason McGuire. We had so many quotes, you know, from the show that we would repeat to each other. We practically talked to each other in quotes from TV shows and movies, and but we completely understood each other, and so many of them were from Dark Shadows.
What what was Becky's favorite special effect, and what's yours?
That's a great one. Okay, I don't. It's not exactly a special effect, but there's a part in there where I'm trying to think. It's Dennis Patrick, but I can't. I'm not so sure it's supposed to have been Jason McGuire or what was the name of Elizabeth's
Paul
husband?
Stoddard.
Paul Stoddard. I couldn't think of the first name. There's this funny thing where it's a still shot of Dennis Patrick's face, but he looks really crazy, and it suddenly appears, and it like I can't remember what the thing is, and I used to turn to her and say, "Oh, I hate that still image and the way they use it." And she used to tease me with that. One time on Facebook, she found that online somewhere, and she posted that on Facebook because she knew how much I hated it and bugged that. What was the situation? I don't remember, but it was like it was supposed to be his like dead body or ghost or something.
Yeah, during the Leviathan arc, Jeb Hawks is saying about how somebody's teasing him, I believe, and they dig up his body,
That's it. Yeah.
and they open up the coffin, and there's this face that
That's
Paul.
it. I
It's
knew
just
it
like
was his. Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, that is like the happiest dead man I've seen.
So that was something really special between us, and it was just so goofy because I don't even think it was an actual shot of him. Actually, it was literally like they took a still photograph of him and just kept putting it up on the screen. So if that's a special effect, then I'll definitely have to go with that one.
We'll count it as one for this podcast.
Okay.
Because it's one of those moments you're not expecting.
That's
Like,
it. Yes.
yeah.
That's exactly what it is. It's suddenly there's that goofy face of Dennis Patrick just shoved in your face. Yeah, oh, that's so funny to think back on that.
And then he plays. I like how he plays the sheriff in House of Dark Shadows. He plays
Yeah,
James Patterson. It's because it's the first time he really plays a major protagonist role.
absolutely. Right. Like, you know, maybe he asked for that specifically. Like, I'm sick of playing these, horrible other characters.
After the picture of his head use, I'm sure like, yeah, I think we need to throw that guy a bone.
Yeah. Oh,
But
you know,
it's so unexpected. I think that's the one thing that shocks. Like, there's a lot of things that are shocking about the Leviathan arc, but when they're
yeah.
digging up the grave, the one thing you're not expecting is just this big smile from this dead guy.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this is funny and morbid at the same time.
That's what they call dark humor.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk about unexpected. I mean, literally the Leviathan storyline itself. And I've said this to other people. I remember I said this to Penny Dreadful when I was talking on her show about imagine a daytime soap opera. Imagine housewives across the country tuning in to basically see an H.P. Lovecraft story of the
Mhm.
Cthulhu mythos on afternoon television, basically for women. It just it boggles my mind what that show got away with and was able to put across to people who wouldn't necessarily ever see anything like that. People talk about, oh, there's never really been a good H.P. Lovecraft adaptation on film, and us Dark Shadows fans have to say, huh, have you ever seen the Leviathan storyline on Dark Shadows? And it's kind of like if they don't know, they'd like, what?
I'm like, if you listen for the breathing that is like Michael Myers esque, which is like a full 11 years before Halloween, and
Yeah.
you hear this breathing, it's
Hmm.
so creepy because you hear it
Yeah.
throughout the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just that goosebump moment because you don't, it's nice that they don't show you what it is because it builds that tension.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah, perfect. That's a place where the low budget actually worked
Yeah.
at the tell don't show type of motif.
What did you think of the ghost of Quentin Collins compared to the man Quentin Collins?
That talk about creepy.
Yeah.
It's the whole thing about the figure of him just standing there staring, not saying a word, and the lighting that they had on him to give it that otherworldly flavor. Now, for me personally, when we do finally get to meet Quentin, it's kind of a come down. It's kind of maybe a little bit of a letdown where like maybe you could imagine more when he's a ghost, and then maybe when you really learn about him. I God love David Selby. uh I'm not the biggest Quentin fan in the world. I'm not. It's that type of character, that swaggering, and this is funny, here's me saying Burke Devlin, but Burke Devlin actually is a good guy,
Yeah.
even though he's kind of swaggering.
Would
I
you?
just it's funny. Uh I'm just not the biggest fan. I'm not the biggest fan of Quentin's treatment of women for that matter. Becky absolutely loved the ghost of Quentin Collins storyline. She didn't really say much about further Quentin storylines, and she didn't dislike the character, but I think that she she thought he was much more effective in that first storyline with him as a ghost. I don't know what David says these days about that storyline, and that he didn't even get any lines, but I would give him a lot of credit for the incredible presence
Yeah.
that he has, the look in his eyes at that point. I think in those scenes, he's maybe more menacing than he'd ever been before. And it's funny how he's like Barnabas, where Barnabas begins as a villain and then becomes an anti-hero and then becomes a hero. It's weird to think of how attracted women were to Quentin when he's really not a good guy at all. And I guess that's what it is. The same with Barnabas. It's you love the bad boy or something like that. Those are two really fascinating characters that really speak to the diversity of that show.
I remember hearing a line from a wrestling manager where they said the men wanted to beat the heels up and the women wanted to sleep with them because they were bad boys. And
Okay.
I think they were mentioning Ric Flair as sort of a preference to this. Now,
Yeah.
for Quentin, what I found strange was we've seen, by the time you see the ghost of Quentin, you see many ghosts. You've seen Josette, you've seen Sarah, and I would say that Josette and Sarah's personality sort of fit their ghost,
Hmm.
where Selby's didn't. He was very flamboyant. He was, yeah, sure, he was rough with women. I agree with you, but he was so charismatic. It's like, who is this? Like, this is
Sure.
not the ghost I saw.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
It,
That's a great point.
it was like it was really strange how the writers do this one. I don't want to say 180, but it felt like that.
Hmm.
But it made the character all the more interesting for it. It's
Hmm.
like, well, wait, are we really seeing the ghost of Quentin? What's going on here? It made
Yeah.
you the writers always made you ask a ton of questions and left you with very little answer,
Yeah.
which made for a great show.
Dark Shadows to me always seemed like a show that adjustments are made as you go along. Some of the storylines seem so long that, and I don't necessarily mean this in a bad way, but you sometimes get towards the end of a storyline and you have to kind of remind yourself where it all began, that it almost morphs into something else, as you're going along. And I think the writers were probably like that it was almost a daily thing about making adjustments as you went along, maybe following something that they didn't necessarily set out to do, or maybe they were hearing input from an actor, about what I want to do this, I want to do that. One of the things that I love, I'm actually doing a watch of Doctor Who right now, where I started at the very beginning in 1963, and I'm doing a podcast on that, and I'm saying to my co-host, who he's a big Doctor Who fan and I'm new to it, but I keep saying to him, boy, does this remind me of Dark Shadows. It's in the way that it's filmed, and also because you can kind of tell that they're in the earlier days, they're kind of making it up as they go along. And what they also do, this is a funny comparison, is that you can tell when one of the actors gets a vacation or has a break, because they contrive something to get that character off screen for
Yeah.
Doctor Who was weekly, obviously Dark Shadows was daily, and here's me jumping up and down and yelling at my co-host, oh my god, this is just like Dark Shadows, where you know damn well that if Barnabas gets chained in the coffin, it's because Jonathan Frid needed a vacation. But again, I think I love that aspect of Dark Shadows, that it was an organic thing that kind of just took paths, here and there, and kind of went anywhere, uh, which is really wonderful.
What was who who was your favorite ghost, and who was Becky's favorite ghost?
With Becky, it's definitely Quentin's ghost. I mean, she loved little Sarah a lot, but it's definitely, Quentin's ghost. And you know what? I think I'm going to have to say that too. I really saw, she talked so much about the show before we actually sat down and watched it together, um, that when I finally saw the things that she was so excited about, I could see what she was saying, and why she was excited about it, and that was definitely one of the times. She really loved the Dream Curse storyline. And this is weird because when I brought it up to other Dark Shadows people, I haven't really gotten that reaction. I found out that it's not really that popular of a storyline, but I think it was at that time, and as a child, there was something about it that appealed to Becky, and that if she brought up any storyline at all, it was the Dream Curse. There was something, about her. I've heard people call it repetitive, and maybe some other unkind things, but I always say, hey, it's not the Leviathan storyline, right? Yeah.
When I was first watching Dark Shadows, and I was watching The Dream Curse,
Mm.
by the time I had watched Dark Shadows, I'd watched a lot of horror.
Yeah.
This makes me think about A Nightmare on Elm Street
Huh.
in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking I'm just probably alone in that one. And no, my buddy Mark Gilman, who's a huge DS fan, he said, did you ever think that when you watch a Dream Curse, it reminds you of Freddy Krueger? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, because here's Angelique. She's causing each person to have their own nightmare.
Uh-huh.
And in ways, Freddy, in many ways, was causing people to have their own nightmare and killing them in it. Now,
Yeah.
she doesn't kill anybody in the dream necessarily, but
Right.
the concept is different. But the terror part aspect is pretty much the same. It's
Yeah.
built upon. I mean, who's the first person who sees it? Maggie. Why? Because Maggie looks like Josette,
Hmm.
and so. And I love Laura Parker's face when she sees Catherine Lee Scott's Mag Given. She's like okay, like that's not how we're gonna play this, which is fun. I I love it for two reasons. Number one, it's a lot of fun, and two, it brings out the importance of Adam too. By the end of it, like when
Hmm.
you look at how like Dr. Lane's creation is not a useless thing, because Adam has to. If Adam lives, Barnabas will be cured. But if Adam dies, Barnabas won't be cured, which I
Yeah.
like. And when the dream curse ends, it doesn't work. Why? Because Adam lives.
Right. Right. That's cool about the Freddy Krueger comparison. I don't think I've had anybody say that to me before. That's really really fascinating.
It's I don't know if what they were necessarily going for, because again, this is well before Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, yeah,
So I don't think they're going, oh, we're going to inspire something years later. But what they're really doing is, in a sense, is what Nightmare on Elm Street's going to continue to do in their franchise.
sure. Y-
The only real big difference is you have a killer in your dream instead of a witch.
Yeah. Have you ever heard Wes Craven say that he was watched Dark Shadows, inspired by Dark Shadows?
No, I here's the thing though. Wes Craven, like when you watch Serpent and the Rainbow, like he seemed to be into certain aspects of the occult and stuff. So I don't know if he
Yeah.
was a Dark Shadows fan or he was
Yeah.
just fascinated with the occult.
Yeah. I
But
think I think Dark Shadows is one of those things where, you're going to see a lot of people who came later who
yeah,
probably watched it and will cite it as an inspiration, which is really really cool. Unfortunately, I wish Tim Burton and Johnny Depp weren't Dark Shadows fans and inspired by it. Or claim that they were Dark Shadows fans. And apologies to anybody out there who is a fan of that movie, but I digress.
it's weird because I've talked about the movie a bunch of times here on the channel, and they're like, I said, there's pros and cons to the movie. And I said, the
Mm,
biggest con is because I remember this going in. I said, here's Johnny Depp, the busiest actor, taking on another role. I'm thinking, have they really put anything into this?
mhm.
And let me tell you, when I knew it was going to go bad, a friend of mine came up. He was giving me cast updates because I didn't have the time to do it. And he's like, did you hear who the cast? I said, no, who they cast now? Because they had a all-star cast, really. And
Yeah.
he said they cast Alice Cooper. At first, I was excited. I'm thinking, oh, as Barnabas's dad? I'm thinking that's my thought process. Like,
Yeah.
no, as himself. I'm like, what? What? What do you mean as himself? And then I saw the movie. I'm thinking, God, why did they do this? But
Yeah.
yeah, it's not great. I do think the first two movies are really good. Um, what was between you and Becky? What's your favorite Dark Shadows movies?
It's definitely House.
Yeah.
I gotta admit something to you, Jewel. I have never seen Night,
Ooh.
and that's mostly because this may sound odd, but she kind of dissuaded me from seeing it, and or almost not necessarily on purpose, but talked me out of seeing it. um we watched House together very early on, and then many times after that. She was a very big fan of it. She saw it as a step up in terms of budget and look, as far as telling the Barnabas story again, albeit with a different ending and a very incredible, alternate type of ending compared to the show.
Yeah.
But every time the subject of Night came up, she'd always go, "It's not very good." I can actually hear her saying that. It's not very good. What part of it might be because Barnabas is not in it at all, and that it focuses, on Quentin, although yet a different Quentin, if I understand this correctly. I'm trying to remember. It might have been. I never really had it explained to me, and it might have been when I was talking with Penny. It might have been her. I'm trying to remember, but somebody really, really explained to me the situation with that movie about how it was heavily edited,
Yeah.
and it's not the movie it was intended to be, and it kind of went off the rails. And again, that kind of, dissuaded me when I hear stories about how things are so chopped up after a director and a cast are done with the film, and that it doesn't really get out to the public in the form that it was intended to be. That kind of sours me on things. These days, I keep saying to myself, okay, Becky's gone now. Maybe I should, maybe I should watch this movie. But correct me if I'm wrong. The like the director's cut, that doesn't exist. There's
No,
nobody.
but a lot of fans want it to happen. They could make it happen.
Okay.
And there's fan petition to get it to happen. Here's the
Yeah.
thing. I was told that Night of Dark Shadows, as I've seen it, it was supposed to be on a double bill, and then it wasn't. So they
Yeah.
had to edit the movie, and in many ways, though the movie you can see now still to me is good enough.
Mm,
It's very much an unfinished product.
yeah.
It has a lot of good psychology to it because again, you're left asking questions,
Yeah.
and but I think when you watch the movie, you can sort of at times, and I won't say it for me because I love the movie, but you can sort of feel let down by the fact because you know when you watch this movie there's supposed to be more. And
Okay.
when you watch it sort of like that, it's like, I wish there was more. But what they do have in there is creepy and very dark toned. It's
Yeah.
I will say this, it's as dark as House of Dark Shadows is. I mean, it's very
It,
dark.
okay. I thought I had somebody describe it to me, or say that House of Dark Shadows is a horror film, but Night is not necessarily a horror film. It's more of a psychological, like you had
Yes.
said, more of a psychological film that there's more of, is it or isn't it?
Yeah.
What's exactly, going on here? It's a real shame because Lara and David get their shot at their own movie. They're the stars. Okay, they've done House, and Jonathan and Catherine and the rest of them get their shot, at a theatrical movie. So now it's David and Lara's turn, and then they end up with a movie that is maybe not, sort of overall not very well remembered because of, so you think that if it was put back together it could be even better?
Yeah, I do. And I think
Okay.
here's my opinion on this, that it's a good movie to watch
Mm-hmm.
because it has all this psychology to it. But at the same time, you're sort of being asked, well, is it even David Selby's character asked, is she real? And what he's asking is Angelique.
Mm-hmm.
Is Angelique real? Because it's Angelique's ghost. And so you meet this woman who's played by Grayson Hall,
Mm.
who was loyal to her, and I love the fact that when you watch House of Dark Shadows and you watch Night, how though they use the Lyndhurst estate again, it's shot very differently than the first movie.
I've seen stills, yeah, and yeah, I mean, whereas House is literally looks very dark. I've seen stills from Night that, yeah, I will say it looks very different.
And I love the car chase. The car chase scene is one of the coolest things in this movie. If
Okay.
you enjoy nothing else about this movie, it'll be the car chase scene. I
Now,
promise
Jewel,
you.
I'm not so sure that that should be the meter stick, for from a Dark Shadows movie, but okay.
Well,
I, I I have to sit down and just watch it and decide for myself. And I
yeah.
don't know, there's a lot that kind of goes into, watching that without her. We should have watched it together, and that didn't happen. So, but I've completed so many journeys since she's been gone. This, my book being the prime one. This was, Becky and I talked about doing a Dark Shadows book for a while, and then I finally, got it done. So maybe Night of Dark Shadows is one of those things that I just have to. The funny thing is that if you're gonna see a Dark Shadows movie pop up on television, it's gonna be House.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't show. I mean, TCM. If I see it's, oh, they're going to show a Dark Shadows movie in October or whatever, it's going to be House. It's not necessarily going to be Night of Dark Shadows. And real quick, speaking of Lara Parker, I mean the stills that I have seen from it, it looks like Lara has never looked more beautiful in
She's
anything than how she looks in Night. So Grayson is actually in Night, is that right?
yeah. John Carlin is in it. Nancy Barrett is in, and they're playing husband and wife. Now Nancy Barrett is not playing a Collins.
Okay, so they're husband and wife, like in alternate
yeah,
time,
and just like in alternate,
parallel.
just like in parallel, John Carlin's character is a writer.
Oh
Um,
wow, okay,
so David Selby's character is a painter,
yeah,
and so was his ancestor Charles Collins.
yeah,
So they're somewhat in a weird way taking the Charles Delaware Tate thing, but they're not fully implying it, or they sort of, again, it's all suggestion
yeah,
of,
yeah,
well, is he really, are the paintings coming? Because you sort of ask that moment, wait, are the paintings coming to life somehow? And it's like, no,
yeah.
that can't be. But it's really psychological and it's really fun to watch.
Okay,
Here's the thing, because I'm a guilty pleasure guy from a
yeah.
movie watcher standpoint. I'll always watch all three Dark Shadows movies every October, and it's just, hey, if you're gonna watch them. Why not?
Wait, what do you consider the third? The the recent one?
Well, listen, the best to me, my best one is Night of Dark Shadows. I love that movie. House, and then the third movie, Tim Burton's movie, is the
Oh,
third.
okay, you are saying Tim Burton's movie.
Well, that's the thing too, and I was having a conversation with two other fans on here, um, Susie and Don Schmidt, and really, the Tim Burton Dark Shadows movie is the first Dark Shadows thing since Dan Curtis's death.
Yeah,
It's really, that's what shocks. There's a lot of things that shocked me about 2012's Tim Burton's movie. Mainly, the most thing that shocks me is the fact that they set it in the 70s. I'm thinking, wait, why? Because
hmm,
that's the thing. Well, the last time we all saw Dark Shadows, if you're including the whole series,
yeah,
is the 91 revival. And that was
right,
set in its time. That was set in
right.
91. So it was really shocking to me that the third movie is set in the 70s. I'm like, that's really odd to me. That's my oddest thing about it. I know there's odder things about it, but for
Yeah.
me, you know.
Well, I guess they wanted that period feel. I'm glad you mentioned the Ben Cross series because Becky was a big fan of that. I always was surprised at how much she was a fan of that, but she really, really did appreciate that show and enjoyed it. We were intrigued when the Johnny Depp one was announced that she could never be mistaken for a Johnny Depp fan. In fact, she actually hated Johnny Depp. But she said once kept hearing more of the cast, she said, "You know what? Okay, I want to go see this. I'm gonna just put the whole thing about Johnny Depp aside." And she said, I do want to see this. And then I remember the day that the trailer came out
Yeah.
and we watched it and we looked at each other and then we said, they're playing it as a comedy. And
Yeah.
she said, you know what? I don't want to see this. And she never did. And I never have to this day. I think I watched like maybe on YouTube or whatever. I saw somewhere I was able to watch the cameos by Jonathan and
Yeah.
Catherine and Lara. And to this day, the shame of the fact that that's either Jonathan's last appearance on film or one of the last appearances.
I believe it's his last. He died.
Yeah, what a shame that would be his last, appearance and it's just kind of a throwaway, type of thing.
What did you and Becky think about Ben Cross's Barnabas? It's so hard to, for someone else to step into someone else's shoes, but in every way, Ben Cross does a fabulous job.
Yeah, and she agreed with that, and I agree with that too. I think she was surprised that she liked that version as much as she did. She liked the whole cast. I mean, Gene Simmons as Elizabeth,
Yeah.
Stott. I mean, wow. She really liked Joanna, is it Goings?
Yeah, Joanna
Yeah.
Goings.
Um, she, it's funny, as much as she loved John Carlin as Willie, she really did like Jim. It's Jim, I can't think of
Faye?
his.
I think it's Faye.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
might
yeah,
be,
yeah.
I
She,
might be mispronouncing.
and as much as we quoted the original series, there were quotes from the 91 revival. She'd say the thing about Nutloaf, that he was always eating the, Auntie's Nutloaf. And she would quote Ben Cross saying, "I cannot help myself."
Yeah.
Just different things like that. I think it's that Sarah. I don't think it's the original Sarah in the show, but the Sarah in the Ben Cross one would say, "Barnabas, you must not do this." She
Yeah.
would she would quote that. It's just so funny how those things worked their way into our brains, and we just non sequiturs that we would just say that stuff. But she was very fond of that, and I think she was a little sad that there was no, that they made just that one, whatever you want to call it, mini series, I guess, and that there, wasn't any more of it. Yeah, so that's what it is. We both, like that. If anybody could come along and pick up that role of Barnabas after, her beloved Jonathan, it would be Ben Cross.
Yeah. I think when I watched it, my wife's like, "What do you think he does well?" I said, "You know, he does so great. He doesn't try to be Jonathan Frid, and that's the
Yes,
thing. You know,
perfect.
you want somebody to play Barnabas their own way,
Yeah.
and he does it so well. He does it with a certain swagger. He does certain
Mhm.
things differently than what Frid did, and that's beautiful to watch. I think my favorite thing about this was the fact that Willie Loomis is related to Mrs. Johnson just had me rolling. I'm thinking, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's sort of a change that you don't mind, right?
Yeah, it's. I like how he's stuttering too when you first meet him. He's like, "See, I found the secret," and then when Barnabas bites him, like his language is getting better, like his speech is getting better. I'm thinking, man, Barnabas is really improved Willie here. It's really cool to see something. And Maggie the Medium was a really fresh change for Maggie Evans. The character
Yeah.
was amazing.
Everybody is playing it their own way. There really isn't any aping, in there. Imagine if they had gone on, like what would they have done with Quentin, and some of the other, characters if they had come back for another mini series. I don't know if there was ever any talk about them coming back and doing more. But that, you have to kind of wonder, what more could they do with the property?
Yeah. You mentioned about your favorite character, one of your favorite characters being Burke Devlin. So,
Hmm.
do you feel that Burke is your first anti-hero of Dark Shadows?
Huh. That's a really good question. Is he an anti-hero? I I I guess he kind of, you know what? Maybe not. I mean, maybe he is an actual hero, but just sort of rough around the edges. You know
Yeah.
what I'm a big pulp fan. The way I write myself, fiction, and the fiction that I like to read is, I'm a huge fan of the pulp novels of the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I think I've brought this up before. Burke Devlin to me is kind of like a throwback pulp hero, kind
Yeah.
of a, two-fisted, whiskey drinking, he's sort of a noir hero type of character. I'm not sure I would come down on the side of calling him an anti-hero. He might be, if it's possible, to be in between an anti-hero and a hero. But I love it when he would kind of swing into action, or look into something because he wanted to, protect Vicky or somebody. I like that, he was a positive male figure for David, because David didn't really, his father certainly wasn't a positive, strong male, figure. God love, Louis Edmonds, another actor that Becky loved, Louis Edmonds, but he, Roger was more concerned with his correspondence and his brandy than anything Burke Devlin would be concerned with.
Yeah, when your kid is removing your bleeder valve of your car,
Yeah, right.
it's not a good sign.
Yeah, I mean, right? That's a
I
good
like
point.
I like how though too, like how they set this all up. Like he's reading about mechanics, and then you see Burke Devlin in the garage because Victoria sees him, and he throws the wrench on the seat, and I'm just like, that I'm like, oh no, I have a feeling our buddy Burke's about to get blamed for something here.
Yeah. Burke did not deserve the end that they gave him.
Yeah.
To me, that was just a really cheap, way to take him out of the show.
I have a little fun theory about Burke Devlin. He actually lives and becomes the Phantom. Um,
Okay. He's always behind the scenes somewhere for the rest of the show. It just doesn't ever
right.
show up. So yeah, okay, I'm gonna subscribe to that one. I like that a lot. Yeah, I want to write some a Dark Shadows fiction where he comes back, because not even a plane crashing in the jungle or whatever the hell that was can
Yeah.
take Burke Devlin out of the picture,
Well,
buddy.
that's sort of the fun thing too. Like my wife pointed out, she goes, "Well, don't you see his ghost?" I said, "No, you see Victoria's subconscious seeing his ghost." And I said, "There's a
Yeah,
difference." I said,
yeah,
"She's traumatized no matter what." I said, "She's gonna see something." I said, "That doesn't mean he's dead."
yeah,
I said, "Dark Shadows, no one's ever." It's like saying Angelique died. It's like
yeah.
saying they killed Kenny. Okay.
It's Victoria who deserved to end up at Wincliffe, not Maggie. That's another thing that kind of sticks in my craw is that, Maggie goes out like a chump, going to Wincliffe, and she didn't deserve that either. It's Vicky. Vicky did not deserve her happy ending, as far as I'm concerned. That's
And
just me though.
well, really, they don't give her too much of a happy ending. They send her back to Jeff Clark, if you will.
Yeah,
You
well, she
know,
gets to leave. That's a happy
right?
ending, right? To get
And
the hell out of that house.
then they say they hunt her, or Christopher Pinock's character says he pushed her off Widow's Hill. It's like, wait, what happened?
One of the things that Becky and I always said was, as much as she loved the show, it's that no one is ever happy for more than like half of an episode. Like
Yeah,
no one can ever be happy. It is an unrelenting, dreary, show. And I say that with a lot of love, but it's so funny how you can't ever hope that anybody will have any happiness that's going to last at all, and that if anybody actually gets out of that house, it's a good thing. But it's just a funny little aspect of that show, is that the writer, it was probably a rule with the writers, no one can ever be happy.
yeah.
It's always going to be unrelenting darkness.
Unless you're Barnabas watching Nicholas be destroyed, that's the happiest moment
I
he has.
guess, yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess. I mean, there is some really great moments of justice, and I think one of the earliest ones would be Barnabas taking care of Jason McGuire. I mean,
Yeah,
Jason McGuire had it coming, and it's wonderful that the new character in the show comes in like a sword of justice, even though he's a villain himself. To
Yeah.
it's almost like, hey, I can kick my dog, but you can't. Like I'm the only one who can abuse this family of mine. You can't, and I need you out of the picture, buddy.
I'm the only one that gets to smack Willie Loomis around.
Yeah, right. I mean, right, right.
Like,
Perfect,
I
perfect.
think one of my favorite moments too is there's a moment when they announce Maggie is dead, and Jonathan Frid and John Carlin are in the old house as their characters,
Mm.
and John Carlin's Willie Lewis. We killed that girl, Barnabas. We killed her, and I'm just waiting for him to turn around and beat the life out of him,
Yeah,
and he does it. I'm thinking, literally, you have John Carlin's Willie Lewis being Jiminy Cricket because he's almost all but on his shoulder when you watch it
yeah.
because he's right behind him, and he doesn't hit him here. I'm thinking, huh, Barnabas knows Willie's telling the truth.
Uh-huh.
It,
Wow, that's a wonderful little thing there that you just said. Willie as Jiminy Cricket, as Barnabas's conscience.
yeah,
Like that's right. You say that out loud, and all I can think of is, well, of course, right. Yeah, Jiminy Cricket. That's wonderful. I love that.
because what was Willie Loomis? He was a thief, and
Yeah, right.
it's how he gets himself into the predicament he's in now. And it's
Hmm.
like when he's getting his butt handed to him by Barnabas, it's like, man, that you see the black and blue marks on Willie. It's like, by God, like could he hit him any harder? But what did you think of the the 1795 time travel and first meeting Angelique?
I mean, that's a classic, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if anything, I think it maybe goes on a little too long. I think it's one of those ones where it may be as, and I'm looking at it as a writer, that I think it probably could have been wrapped up. That's another thing about Dark Shadows, and I kind of touched upon that earlier, is that sometimes things do go on a little too long, and it could have been a little tighter. Some storylines sort of overstay their welcome maybe, and as much as iconic as that storyline is, I feel like it goes on a little too much.
Yeah.
And then this is funny, then there are storylines that don't go on long enough. Like one of my most favorite things about Dark Shadows is when they go into the future.
Yeah.
I and I talk about writing fiction. That would be, if I ever got to write any official Dark Shadows fiction, I would revisit that future, of the ruined Collinwood and the living ghosts that sort of haunt that. I was fascinated by that, especially because at that time that Dark Shadows was taking place. What is it? What did they jump into? What is the year? Is it
1995.
yeah, like that's just insane.
Yeah.
I mean, that was more than 20 years that they were, jumping ahead. So I just love that little part of it and wanted so much more. I wish they would have devoted more time to that.
By the time I watched Dark Shadows and I got to this arc, I'd watched every George A. Romero film up until that point, and
Mm,
this whole I mean, 1995. It's the beginning. It's the official beginning of the Judah Zacher arc in a sense.
yeah.
But to me, it felt like George A. Romero was writing and directing Dark Shadows for those 9
Mm,
episodes. I mean, it's doom is imminent and it's here. It's in your face, and there's
yeah.
nothing you can. And then when they go back
Yeah.
and they watch it happen, powerless to stop it. It's like, but it felt like George A. Romero was like waving high at the DS universe.
That's cool.
It's a really great arc to see Crazy Carolyn, Mrs. Johnson, and
Crazy Carolyn. I
I
love
like how
that.
she asked Barnabas, "How long have you been?" "I've been here since the beginning." It's like, yeah, it sort of feels like you have here,
Uh-huh.
but and I like because she pulls out the Barnabas portrait later, and it's like Carolyn has just lost it. Professor Stokes looks afraid. It's like, my God, like this is some dark stuff,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, it really is, and that's why I say I would have liked to have explored that time a little bit more. Like, what were things like outside of Collinwood at that time? That it would have been really interesting to see. But it served its purpose, and they, went on from there, like you said, that pretty much kicked off that bigger storyline.
Yeah. As a writer, what would you do with a second season of the revival?
I think, like I said, I would bring Quentin in. I I'd like to think that they could do the ghost of Quentin storyline. I'm not really certain. Or they could have done something completely different with him. Um, and I'd really have to sit and think about that. But I think that would have been the obvious place. And I don't say obvious in a bad way, but I think that would be what probably most everybody would have wanted to see. And the casting, wow, I mean the mind boggles of who they might have been able to, I mean if they got Ben Cross to play Barnabas, and I mean, and some of Roy Thinnis, as yeah, as Roger. um that was an amazing cast from top to bottom. um yeah, if it was up to me, I would have brought in Quentin. I think I would have tried to do the ghost storyline first and see if there was a way to do it even, more creepier than the original way they did it. But I think bringing in Quentin would have been the smart thing to do.
Yeah. It'd have been fun to see if it would have got a season two. It would have been fun to see. Because I'm with you. I enjoyed the '91 revival.
Mm,
It's really well acted, well written. It's completely different than what you see in the original series for the most part, from the character standpoint. I
yeah,
love how the characters are getting this fresh coat of paint, and it's just nice to see.
yeah, yeah.
What's what's your favorite, or so, for between parallel time, 1970 and 1841? Which one's your favorite?
Probably the 1971. I'm a little weird. I'm not the biggest fan of the back in time storylines. I kind of think the parallel time stuff was more interesting. I'm fascinated in fiction by houses that are almost living things,
Mm.
houses that are bigger on the inside than they are on the outside, houses that have many, many rooms and corridors. That's an aspect of Dark Shadows that has always really drawn me in. And the idea of of stumbling across a room that you cross a threshold, or you go through a door and then you are still in that house, but in a like they did a parallel time. That's really fascinating with me. And I really liked that John Carlin got to play such a different character. And that's another thing that draws me in. And he's a writer, I mean, of course he's not happy, as most writers are not. I can attest to that. But I think that's really fascinating that he got to play something so different. So yeah, I'm gonna go with the parallel time rather than going back in time. I kind of like the time staircase. I
Yeah.
will admit to that. I wasn't crazy about the I Ching wands or whatever the hell that was, but I did like the staircase idea because that kind of goes into that again, that like a part of a house
Yeah.
that you go through this, you go down these stairs, you go through that door, and then everything changes.
Here's a weird question for you. Do you think the inside of the walls of Collinwood sometimes move?
Wow. Wow, mind blown. That's a fascinating thing to contemplate because that would suggest that the house is alive in some way. Um, I don't know. I'd kind of like to explore that idea. But whether or not that's suggested in the series, I couldn't really say. I don't really think so. Um, Although there always seem to be finding, again, rooms or places in that damn house that, oh, I've never seen this before.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like either renovate that house or just tear it down. I mean, I can't fathom the idea of having an entire part of the house that you live in you shut it off and you don't use it. An entire wing of, oh, we don't use that. Nobody goes to that wing of the house. Like, what are you talking about? It's your house. Like, of course you do. But I'll just say I like that idea, but I'm not going to swear that it really did happen.
Right. Right. Caleb Sayers Collins, his house. Can it move through time, do you think?
Wait, whose house?
Caleb Sayers Collins. He's the characters who he owns the Seaview house. It's the character that Vicky and Burke they want to buy his house. Well,
Oh,
he has it in his will that no one can buy his house, not even a Collins for over 100 years, which marks the end of the show, by the way.
yeah.
And it's really weird that when Vicky goes in there, she says she swears she saw a mass schooner. And I get they're sort of setting up for 1795 because this happens prior to all
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But I always felt that there was something about his house that he did not want people to discover.
Can yeah, I'm dredging this whole part up to me up in my mind again. I hate to be non-committal on that one either. I like the idea again. I think that might have been too ambitious of an idea for when the show was produced. And that's funny for me to say because the idea again for a daytime soap to have such a thing as time travel or the idea of parallel time is almost incomprehensible that ended up in a daytime soap that housewives were watching. So, but yeah, I don't know about people moving through time. Yeah, staircase, sure. Oh, an entire house. I I would have to say I probably can't see that. No.
Right.
Great
So,
idea. I mean, sometimes like a fan theory is better sometimes than what we actually got.
Widow's Hill. Why does nobody stay away from that place?
It's the same idea as a train wreck. You
Right.
can't turn away from it. Somebody says, "Don't go up on Widow Hill," and of course that's where you go. It's the story of Bluebeard. You can go in any room in this house, save this one. And of
Mm.
course you're going to go into, that room. I think that's just an innate human thing. When we're told to not do that one thing, that's what we do. But I mean, it's it's haunted just like anything else. Jewel, there's a really wonderful movie, and you probably have seen it, The Uninvited.
Yeah.
It's that has that same idea in it, where right outside the house there's a sort of a widow's hill. There's a drop off, and the girl in the story is drawn to that mostly by the ghosts, but also by her own obsession with the past
Yeah.
and her obsession with her mother. It's that same sort of idea that it's like a compulsion to go out there. And she almost goes over the edge twice during the movie. One time she actually does, and she's hanging there and has to be, dragged back up. I think, yeah, Widow's Hill is the same sort of way. There's just that sort of built-in compulsion about it. Partly supernatural and partly through the power of suggestion.
Yeah.
You plant that idea in somebody's head in that show, and of course you're going to go and do that. Why does anybody do anything in that show? If people would have just controlled themselves, we wouldn't have had that show, because nobody would have done all the stupid things that they do.
Yeah, I like how Roger's telling her the story of the widows, which is really fun, and
Yeah.
how Jeremiah chased them away, and you hear the wind blowing, and he goes, "They haven't gone; they're still here."
Yeah.
And it's just a little fun that you could tell Lewis Edmonds was having fun with that scene,
Yeah. Yes.
and it's so awesome when you see that. But I don't think I have any more questions for you. Running Home from Shadows, a link to where you can go get it's going to be the description box,
Great.
and it is nominated for a Rondo Award. Congratulations, by the way.
Is that insane or what? One of the nicest surprises of my life, and I don't say that lightly. I actually had to have somebody in who's in the book, Dr. Jeff Thompson, messages me the other day with a link, and he's like, "Oh, hey, the book has been nominated for a Rondo." It's like, what? And I'm like, I don't know anything about this. Like, nobody told me. It makes me wonder how long I would have gone along without knowing it, but Jeff, points it out to me. And here's me going like, okay, this is really cool, but do I ask people to vote, or should I let it be natural and organic? I went and took a look at what I'm up against,
Yeah,
and what I'm up against is just like a is just immense. For number one, the number of books
yeah,
that I'm up against, and then with nonfiction heavy hitters like Greg Mank and some of these other guys, I'm just like, okay, I think it's just going to be very, very nice to be nominated, and I'll kind of leave it at that. But if anybody out there is listening, and I cannot swear to this, but if this book is the only Dark Shadows book that's represented this time around, this is a chance to elevate Dark Shadows once again, and put it out there. I don't ask this lightly, because personally I'm not a one for awards, or I'm not doing what I do to try to win awards. I'm trying to make books that people will enjoy and love. And I say that very seriously. Um, if you go out and vote for Running Home to Shadows, number one, I appreciate that on behalf of everybody involved in the book. We appreciate that. Consider it more of a vote for all of the incredible writers that are in this book, and for the spirit of Becky, because this book is for her, and dedicated to her, and exists because of her, and again, it would be a vote for her, and it would be a vote for all of the amazing writers who gave their time and their memories, to this book. From what I understand, it's a little difficult to vote for in the rondos. It's a little challenging. So I've had more than one person tell me that it's kind of weird the way you vote. So I haven't gone and voted myself for other things, so I'm not quite sure. But even if it's a little bit of a challenge, if you feel strongly about it, please take a look at it. The Rondo Hatton Awards, and we're in category number 11, which is books, not books nonfiction. And find us. We're kind of far down in the list, but again, let's elevate Dark Shadows once again. Last year I think there was more than one Dark Shadows book in the nominations. So this is really cool that this, it's been a long time that original show has been off the air, but it's never going to die because of the amazing group of fans that keep it alive, that keep pumping life into it. And I just think that's amazing. I didn't know what I had come into when I published this book. I knew that the Dark Shadows community was cool and all of that. I never realized that the support that was there from the community. They have really, really supported this book, and I am forever grateful for that.
Guys, go stuff the ballot box. Just go vote. Go vote for Dark Shadows.
Jewel said that. I didn't say that.
See,
if you want to, I don't want to force anybody. I don't.
last year I did a video saying, because when we had all those Dark Shadows nominees, I'm like, go stuff the ballot box for DS.
Yeah.
So this year again, go stuff the ballot box for Dark Shadows.
Okay.
Get your votes in and just vote nothing but Dark Shadows. You don't have to vote for anything else. Just vote Dark Shadows.
It might be, because I'm trying to think back. The new Dark Shadows Day book came out this year, so that would be in the running. It may be the only Dark Shadows book that's in there, because I can't think.
I'm still reading the Dark Shadows Day book Unbound. I read your book here. I bought it a week ago and I read it, and so I really liked it. By the way,
thank you.
I loved your story about your wife, your late wife. It was really touching.
Thanks. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. Is there anything you want to add before you go?
No, just that I've had a really great time. This has been really, really fun. I never get tired of talking about this crazy, wonderful show, this crazy, wonderful thing called Dark Shadows. I never imagined that I would be immersed so much, in this. But I, I owe it all to Becky, and again, the Dark Shadows community is just fantastic, and I love everybody I've encountered since this book has come out.
It's a really cool community to be a part of, for sure.
Thank you.
For Jim Beard, I'm Joel Sains. You guys have a great night. Jim, take care, buddy.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.